So every year, as the calendar flips toward December, a seemingly simple social question. It just explodes online. It becomes one of the most intense debates you'll see.
It's like clockwork, isn't it? The same question. Can I wish my Christian neighbors or my colleagues a happy holiday? It all boils down to that one very high stakes question. Is it halal or haram?
Right. And what our sources for this deep dive show is that this greeting, it actually touches the very core of, how a society holds together, how peaceful relations are maintained.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not here today to issue a ruling for you, the learner. Our goal is to do a detailed examination. We're looking at the specific scholarly methodology used by a major global Islamic institution, Al-Azhar.
That's the critical distinction. We're getting behind the verdict to look at the intellectual tools. Our mission is to understand the logical, the jurisprudential, and the historical methodology they use. I mean, how does a major school of thought approach an issue where texts seem to point in completely different directions?
Okay, let's unpack this then. If they're trying to resolve a conflict like that, they must start with a really massive, unassailable foundation. So where do the sources establish that foundational principle?
Their whole argument, it rests on establishing the highest possible ethical standard first. The methodology doesn't start with greetings. It starts with a general foundational rule for relations with peaceful non-Muslims. Al-bir wa al-quest.
Goodness and justice.
Goodness and justice. That's the overarching ethical mandate.
And what's the specific source for that mandate? I mean, where do they pull that from?
It's derived directly from the Quran. Specifically, it's verse 8 of Surah al-Mumtahana. It states, God does not forbid you from those who do not fight you because of religion and do not expel you from your homes, that you show them kindness, or taburahum, and deal with them justly. Tushitu ilayhim.
Okay, here's where the Arabic term itself becomes really, really important. The source emphasizes the term taburahum to show kindness. It's an extremely loaded word.
It absolutely is. The significance of al-bir is that it means the highest degree of benevolence, the highest form of ethical excellence. Just think about where else that word is used in Islamic scripture.
Right.
It's the same word used for the highest standard of filial piety, bir al-walidain, the ultimate duty a child owes their parents.
Wow. So if the Quran uses the same word for your duty to your parents as it does for your peaceful neighbor, that goes way beyond just, simple tolerance. It's mandating proactive, positive conduct.
Precisely. And this broad understanding of al-bir is what allowed early jurists to apply it in very practical ways, like in financial matters. Because of this verse, scholars long ago permitted giving general charity, sadaqah, to poor non-Muslims.
Yeah.
And even more crucially, they allowed the obligatory charity from the end of Ramadan, zakat al-fitr, to be given to them. The foundation is shared humanity, justice, and active benevolence. Everything else has to flow from that.
That makes a lot of sense. You establish the big picture first. But how does that translate to, day-to-day choices? The sources must offer something more tangible to bridge that gap.
They do. They turn to two major proofs. One is narrative, rooted in a very human story, and the other is rational, rooted in a point of law.
Let's start with the human story. The sources bring up this really compelling narrative of Asma bint Abi Bakr.
Right, Asma. So she was visited in Medina by her own mother. Now, the key detail here is that her mother, Qurtayla, was still a polytheist at the time, not even from a heavenly religion.
And Asma was hesitant, right?
Yeah.
Given the huge difference in faith and the whole political situation.
Exactly. So she goes directly to the Prophet and asks, Afa asilo umi? Should I maintain ties with my mother? Should I be kind to her?
And his response?
Immediate and unambiguous. Nam, sili umak? Yes, maintain the relationship with your mother. It was a clear command for benevolence, even across the deepest possible ideological divide you could imagine.
So the logical argument that flows from that becomes one of scale. If maintaining the highest degree of kindness with a polytheist mother is commanded, how can a simple, polite, congratulatory word to a colleague be forbidden?
It creates an immediate, stark, intellectual paradox. I mean, if the reason for prohibition is a difference in belief, well, that difference is maximal in the mother's case, yet the act of is commanded.
You're accepting the really large, heavy principle, maintain ties with a non-believing parent, but then rejecting the tiny, simple offshoot of a common greeting.
It just doesn't hold up logically.
Wait, that's a massive intellectual move. They're saying if you accept the whole institution of building relations with a non-believer, then the argument against a single word just collapses.
And if that story sets the stage, the source's most powerful rational argument deals with a fundamental legal point. the explicit permissibility of marrying women from the people of the book.
Christians or Jews. So we're moving from familial ties to the most intimate possible social tie.
Exactly. The Quran permits a Muslim man to marry a Christian or Jewish woman, live with her, raise children with her. And it goes even further. It describes the basis for this lifelong relationship as mawadda wa rahma,
Love and mercy.
love and mercy. So the argument becomes, how can it be intellectually consistent to accept the whole, the marriage, the shared home, the kids, the mandated love and mercy,
The entire life together.
and the entire life together, and yet reject the part, which is a single polite congratulatory phrase to that same wife on her holiday?
If the reason for the ban is non-belief, that reason is completely present, it's maximized within the permitted marriage itself.
It's inconsistent. You can't approve of the main structure, the whole family edifice, and then forbid one small polite detail inside it.
Which forces the debate to move. You have to confront the texts that are used to prohibit the greeting head-on. Any rigorous methodology has to address the counter-arguments directly.
And the primary evidence you always hear is that well-known hadith in Sahih Muslim, do not start with the Jews and the Christians with salam, peace.
At face value, that sounds incredibly compelling. If you can't even initiate the standard Islamic greeting of peace, how could you possibly offer a holiday greeting?
This is where they deploy the crucial tool of understanding historical context, the siyaq. The sources say that taking this text as an absolute decontextualized rule is a profound methodological error. You have to know the circumstance.
And what was that circumstance?
The historical narratives link this hadith specifically to a state of declared war, or at least high hostility. The prophet said this while preparing his army to confront the tribe of Banu Qurayza.
The tribe that had broken a major covenant during the Battle of the Trench. An act of betrayal.
A life-or-death betrayal.
Yeah.
So in that specific military context, the word salam meant way more than just hello.
It wasn't a social greeting.
Not at all. In military terms, salam meant granting an assurance of safety, aman. So, of course, a commander preparing to engage an enemy would forbid his troops from granting them safety before the battle even starts. It was a military order.
Okay, and what about the second part of that hadith, the part about forcing them to the narrowest part of the road? That sounds equally severe.
And that, too, was purely tactical. It was military instruction for troop movement in a combat zone, to ensure control over the roads, prevent ambushes. It was not social legislation for how to treat your neighbors on the way to the market in peacetime.
So the problem is when these abbreviated military narratives are just lifted out of their context of war and then applied incorrectly to a completely different context of civil coexistence.
It's a methodological distortion. And what's fascinating is how they move to an even more technical point in jurisprudence, in usul al-fiqh.
Yeah.
They argue that the authenticity of the chain of narrators for a hadith, it's necessary, but it's not sufficient for it to be implemented as a general law.
That seems like a really big deal. If the chain is sound, if we're confident the prophet said it, how can jurists technically say we still won't apply this as a general permanent social law?
Because there can be what they call mawani, or obstacles, to its implementation. These obstacles are there to make sure no single text, even an authentic one, contradicts the higher objectives of the faith.
Like what kind of obstacles?
Well, the hadith might contradict a stronger Quranic verse or a clear rational principle like the marriage paradox we just talked about, or, and this is crucial, it might be in opposition to the continuous, centuries-long practice of the community, the amal al-ummah.
So it's less like a single law from one moment and more like a deeply ingrained collective institutional practice that carries enormous weight.
Exactly. And to show this isn't a modern invention, the sources cite the famous example of Imam Malik. He would sometimes prefer the amal al-Madina, the practice of the people of Medina, over a hadith with a perfectly sound chain.
Oh, why would he do that?
His reasoning was powerful. The people of Medina, the first generations, they lived it. They saw the companions and their students daily. So if you find them all doing something collectively, continuously, that collective practice is seen as a stronger operational sunnah than one single isolated narration.
It's like an empirical consensus.
That's a good way to put it. It dictates the true intent and the scope of the rule.
So the source pulls a kind of golden rule from this. If a hadith, even an authentic one, has been neglected by the great established scholars and schools of thought for centuries as a general law, That strongly suggests they saw a contextual limit on it.
Right. It suggests that it expired with the circumstances. They look at the historical record. You just don't find texts where Muslim communities were applying this rule about initiating salam as some mandatory social law. The continuous practice has always favored peaceful coexistence. It confirms the prohibitions were specific to their military context.
Which means the ruling that permits greeting is built on these three pillars: a clear Quranic foundation, burrs, strong rational arguments like the marriage paradox, and then this rigorous scientific methodology of contextualizing hadith.
And that stability, that methodology, is why this conversation is so important.
But if the methodology is so clear among major institutions like al-Azhar, why does this specific controversial debate just get amplified every single year?
Well, this is where the source shifts focus to contemporary relevance. It attributes the constant resurfacing of these aberrant rulings primarily to a political objective.
A political objective.
Yes, that these rulings are often pushed by those who want to sow internal conflict, to create tension between co-nationals, and to destabilize societies from within.
That's a bold claim, that it's less about sincere scholarly difference and more about directed conflict. Does the source offer evidence for that?
The evidence is the immediate result, the breakdown of social trust. And beyond that, the source argues that broadcasting this conflict to the world also exports this negative, isolationist image of the community.
And that image could be used by others.
It can serve broader agendas, potentially justifying hostile policies. So it becomes a battle of image and reputation on a global scale, where these fringe views get amplified way beyond their actual scholarly weight.
And in a way, the leaders of the institution counteract this not just with words, but with actions.
Absolutely. The evidence against the fringe view is practical and it's visible. The Grand Imam of al-Azhar, other religious authorities, they personally visit and exchange congratulations with the Coptic Pope during the holidays. This real-world practice directly contradicts the politically motivated fatwas that flood social media.
Okay, let's just quickly summarize the journey we took today, the learner. We navigated some pretty complex jurisprudence, and we've shown that the permission to greet is based not on convenience, but on prioritizing the highest ethical standards.
Yeah, the conclusion of this deep dive is that, from this powerful scholarly perspective, congratulating fellow citizens on their holidays isn't just an optional social courtesy. It's an active, practical application of the highest ethical standards of coexistence and human relations that the faith prescribes.
So the complexity we just navigated, it's not just academic. It has massive real-world implications for how stable societies function.
And how a religion defines its ethical presence in the world.
But that leaves us with one final thought to carry forward. In this age of social media, where authentic scholarly works are so easily drowned out by controversial sound bites, how can we develop the critical thinking skills to distinguish between genuine, respectful, scholarly differences, which are essential and manufactured, directed conflict that is designed only to create societal strife?
That's the methodological challenge we all face every day.
That's something for you to mull over.